Radhe Krishna, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Srimate Ramanujaya Namaha. Welcome to the Bhakti Secret episode number 15. Swami Ramanuja is continuing to listen to the Bhakti secrets of the Lady of Thirukkolur with rapt attention and admiration. Usually, if there is something which the opposite person is talking about and we already know, we have a tendency to either interrupt and interfere or stop active listening. But Swami Ramanuja allowed the monologue to flow freely in spite of knowing every bit of detail which the Lady of Thirukkolur was talking about. Such is his greatness. Now in the last 4 verses, the Lady of Thirukkolur mentioned about 4 Azhwars or great saints of Lord Vishnu. Just to do a quick recap, it was Andal, Azhwar, Tirumalizai Azhwar and Nam Azhwar. Today in the 15th episode, she is talking about another great Azhwar. Now this Azhwar was born in the South Indian state of Kerala. Apart from being a great king, he was also a learned scholar. So we are talking about the Azhwar who is none other than the great Kulasekara Azhwar. So the verse which the lady told Swami Ramanuja is, "Did I pray like Kulasekara Azhwar?" Now one may wonder, there are people who are praying day in and day out. So what did this Kulasekara Azhwar pray for, such that it left a lasting impression in the mind of this Lady of Thirukkolur? We'll come to that in a short while. Let us see something about Kulasekara Azhwar. He was an efficient king who kept his subjects happy, yet he was a great devotee of Lord Vishnu. The depth of his devotion was unfathomable. To try and understand a little bit about his devotion, let us see one incident from his life. So one day there was a narrator who was explaining the epic Ramayana. Kulasekara Azhwar was also sitting and listening to that story. So this narrator was talking about an episode where there were thousands of demons who had gathered to fight with Lord Rama. Now this fight was triggered by Lakshman cutting off Surpanakha's nose, which we know in this Ramayana story. The moment Kulasekara Azhwar heard that Lord Rama was being attacked, he just got up in rage, drew out his sword and said, "I and my army will immediately go and help Lord Rama." Now the narrator, he didn't expect this turn of events, so he was taken aback a bit. So he pacified the king, saying that it was just one part of the story. In the other part, Lord Rama fought with all those demons and he slayed them and he was safe. Hearing that, Kulasekara Azhwar regained composure and his joy knew no bounds. So such was a great king who assumed the distress and the happiness of the Lord as his own. Such is the hallmark of a great devotee like him. Now coming to his prayers, which this lady is talking about in the Bhakti secret. Kulasekara Azhwar had a long-standing wish to visit Tirupati on a pilgrimage and have darshan of Lord Balaji, his consort Padmavati. But his kingly duties prevented him from going on such a pilgrimage. But his mind was filled with the thoughts of Lord Balaji and Padmavati. So every day when he woke up, his first thought was, when would I go to Tirupati on a pilgrimage? So he would get up, he would physically turn himself in the direction where Tirupati was from his place, and he would mentally offer his prayers. Now his prayers, like all the other Azhwars, were in the form of hymns or poems which extolled the virtues of the Lord. In one such poem, which comprises of 10 verses, Kulasekara Azhwar wants to become some kind of an object on the sacred Tirumala hills. He compares himself to some kind of an animate or an inanimate object, saying that it is better to be associated with the sacred Tirumala hills in the form of some object rather than leading a luxurious life as a king. Now, to give some examples from those 10 verses, in the first verse, he compares himself to be a bird. Now, why does this king want to be born as a bird? He feels that as a bird, he would have the freedom to fly across the sacred hills of Tirumala. There would be no one to bother him. He can go around, he can listen to the divine songs, to the stories which would be narrated across those hills. He can go and feast on the leftover food by the devotees. He could go to any river stream on the hills and drink water. So he feels that such a kind of life as a bird would definitely be better than his current state as a king. Then in the second verse, he feels that if he were to be a bird, yes, there are some perks and benefits which I just explained, but he feels that there is a possibility that he could still, fly away from the sacred Tirumala hills. So he wishes to be born as a fish. Now, what is the advantage here? Being born as a fish, he feels that his life would start and end in the sacred hills. He feels that if he were to be a fish swimming in one of those ponds or the river streams, maybe the Lord and his consort may walk across the stream, they may take rest by sitting on that river bank with their legs immersed, and Kulasekara Azhwar as a fish, he could just swim across and nibble the feet of the Lord and his consort, and that would give such a joy and happiness to him which is not available in his life as a king. So these are some kind of comparisons he makes. Let's see maybe a couple of more comparisons where he wants to take a birth as a tree in the Tirumala hills which gives out colorful and sweet smelling flowers. Now those flowers would be used in the worship of Lord Balaji. So that is the advantage of being a tree, and again the life would start and end in the hills. He goes on for 7 more verses. Of that, the last verse is a masterpiece where he prays that he wants to be born as a stone step in the sanctum of the Lord's temple. So if he were to be the last step just before the Lord, he would have a view of the Lord without any restrictions, and he would be able to enjoy the beauty of the Lord perpetually. So honoring Kulasekara, the last step after which the Lord Balaji stands in Tirupati, is named as the Kulasekara step, because the Azhwar desired to be that very step by which he could enjoy the beauty of the Lord perpetually. So that was the beauty of his composition, where he just wants to be associated with something in Tirupati. Now, unless the Azhwar would have experienced himself as a bird or as a fish or as a tree or as a path or as a step, he wouldn't have been able to come out with such a marvelous treatise. This particular hymn or these set of verses attracted the lady of Thirukkolur. She feels that the Azhwar had a great intention in praying for an association with Tirupati. Now she feels that she never had any such desire, even though she was staying in a divine land called Thirukkolur. So where is her devotion compared to the great devotion of the Azhwar? So Kulasekara Azhwar's life definitely has a lesson for all of us who feel that we don't have time to do devotion or engage ourselves in prayers because of our day-to-day commitments. Time, place has no relevance to Bhakti. Wherever you are, whatever time zone you are in, it is always possible to do Bhakti because it is something in the mind rather than being in a particular place. Now, Kulasekara Azhwar was in the state of Kerala, and he could, just by his power of his thoughts and mind, he could imagine himself to be some particular object in Tirupati which is quite far off. So it's all in the mind. Even for us, like, we may have a stressful time in our professional lives, but definitely we could find at least 5 minutes of time where we could just think about something divine, we could think about something positive with full focus. Now that would help to reduce the burden, reduce the stress to some extent. When we feel relaxed and refreshed, we will be able to find such slots of 5-10 minutes throughout the day. And that is one of the roots to practice devotion. So it doesn't mean that devotion will come only if you are able to visit a particular temple or a particular place of pilgrimage or holy land. Devotion can come at your office desk also. So try to find these 5 minutes, 2 minutes slot where you can focus completely on something divine, on something positive, and enjoy life as a refreshing experience rather than as a stressful experience. So stay devoted, stay blessed, and stay tuned for our next episode. Radhe Krishna, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Srimate Ramanujaya Namaha.